it's 62.
There we go. That looks like that'll work.
All right, glad you all are here. Smaller group, but we're getting there. Maybe we're making it too easy for people to watch it at home, right? That's one of the things that's a double-edged sword when you do your liturgies and they're online. It becomes easy to stay at home and watch it that way. I found that out at my last church. We committed to streaming all our services, doing morning and evening prayer every day, and it became evident that we had a second congregation that didn't come to church that much. And I say that because I think that's fitting as to talk about things like that as we're deciding what we want our worship to look like in our space here and in the future. I'd like to make a couple of public service announcements. One, next week, where will we be? This is a question. Bay Creek, excellent. We will be in the Bay Creek room, and we'll be moving around. It's going to be a brainstorming kind of thing, and so come prepared. And I'll list again the 10 areas that I want you to think about. You don't have to have any answers, but if you put some pre-thought into this, as I know some have, bring a sketch, bring a picture of something you've seen somewhere that can be up on one of these boards. So we'll be looking at a sanctuary interior, a sanctuary exterior, music space, office space, outdoor space, meeting space, outreach space. And when I think of that, every church I've ever been to has a nice public ministry of their facilities being offered for free to the community for different things. And so that's what I mean by outreach space. A kitchen, that implies a large gathering room, I think. How we might be green, meaning sensitive to God's creation as we build. What might that look like? I think it's appropriate for St. Francis to be thinking about these things. I also know it's a lot more expensive, but you might be able to find some grants to help with this. So, and then the last one, how can we be sensitive to our history when we build? What might that look? Those last two, I think, could be hard. I mean, we'll look at each other and say, well, I don't know. If it is, then that's what that is. I at least want us to think about those. And then the week after that, we'll be back in this space, and we'll be seeing this, The Adversary. It's a one-man show, and I hope y'all come to that. I watched it online, so it's a pretty good production. I mean, the guy's talented, and I think we'll enjoy it. And to help us, well, you've seen it all. It's been listed in our different publications on what's going to happen and when. So our work today, and work is probably a good way to begin this, is on liturgy. Does anybody know the classic definition, especially when we're talking about the Episcopal Church, a definition of liturgy?
What you do.
What you do? But, you're backing into where I'm going, so that's good.
Here for you.
Thank you, always. It's called the work of the people. When you go to seminary, Liturgy 101, that is taught the very first day. It's the work of the people, and it implies, I think, a mutual responsibility. In the liturgy, the worshipers actively serve God and one another, and it's a communal effort that honors the divine. If you break up that word, it comes from a Greek word, liturgia, or gia, I think it was, liturgia, which means public service. And then leiton, which means a public building. And then laos, the laity, y'all know that word. I often refer to the laity, which those who weren't ordained. And then ogia, which signifies work or service. Put together the work of the people, public service. We are actively working together in our worship. Our work as a church, when we're talking about liturgy, what does that look like? What should it look like?
In the church.
Well, let's begin in the church at least. I mean, if our definition, worship is the work of the people, what does it look like in this building? All right, well, I'm just going to answer it for you. We have sacred time, sacred space, which is the architecture, sacred words, which are the words that the celebrant says, but also the words that are responded. Much of liturgy is like a seesaw. We hear the word, we respond to the word. We hear the word, we respond to the word. Our response could be in word, prayer, or song. We hear the word, we respond to the word. And each day, each Sunday at least, we're working on a little section of words, not everything, to be inspired. Did I say sacred music? Sacred music. And then all together, you put it all together, that is our sacred work, to bring that all together. And Episcopalians, I think, we value our liturgy. We value our work, and it's a full contact sport sometimes. Liturgy uses all five senses, your sight, your smell, touch, hearing. Everything is what our liturgy should be. We should be getting up and moving. You know, they say it's Episcopal aerobics. You know? We don't kneel here because we don't have kneelers, but that may be a choice we think about in our next space. Does it put us in a more prayerful posture as to kneel? Right? And that's kind of our sacred space and sacred words kind of bumping into each other, and we'll have to make some decisions about that. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between worship and performance, right? So we're doing something, even though we're laid out like an auditorium, and many churches are even more in an auditorium setting, there's something different that we're doing here. Would y'all agree with that?
Different than what?
Than a performance.
Oh.
I would agree.
Okay. Because we are active participants, we are, again, all those five sacred pieces, we're actively engaged, we're praying to God, we're asking God for things, we're responding to words and prayers, so we're actively participating in this. This is one of the reasons that I've asked everybody to take on the Lenten discipline of not clapping in church, is because this is a worshipful time and it's not a performance. Now, I will grant you that there are some things that need applause. But do we need to clap 4 or 5 times a week in a service? Right, it's getting a little bit further out than we need to be. That to me is signifying, all right, are we performing? Or are we worshiping?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I think you said, or maybe I just thought you said, that we would do the non-clapping during Lent.
Right.
Does that imply that we'll go back to it?
Not necessarily. This is just to get us going.
I'm always
I mean,
bothered by that.
However, I would like us to have a discussion about it, because if I'm the only one that thinks that, then I'm not going to impose my will on other people.
I always feel like I'm watching the Four Tops from the start acting, you know, it's like.
Right. But if somebody were to stand up here and we have, our 90th birthday, it's appropriate to clap, right?
But that's not part of the.
But it is. It's right smack in the middle. I would say that the announcements aren't really part, but we have it as part of our liturgy. Maybe we move those, There's no good time to do announcements.
They are interrupted.
They are an interruption, so I irreverently call it halftime. Which kind of goes against what I'm saying, this being the work of the people, it being sacred time and sacred space, and we're in halftime, so it's a little tongue in cheek there. But
so where does the Spirit moves me? Where that is reaching inside emotionally and maybe hitting a mark, is something I respond to
Mhm.
in a church that is over there, where there's a lot of back and forth going on during the service.
Right.
Yes, right on.
Right on. Yeah. So, and I would say that the Episcopal flavor of worship generally doesn't have that. We generally don't have movie screens with the words coming up.
Oh, my,
We choose a different path. That doesn't say that's wrong. What I'm saying is for our space and the way we Episcopalians work, generally speaking, that's the way we view it.
I'm more or less referring to how we have people come from different places, different cultures, etc., and how tolerant or welcoming we would be for someone that would be here that something's taking place that just, wow,
Right.
I don't respond.
I don't think we'd ever condemn anybody, but let me move the subject just a little bit. But it's the answer to the same question. In the Episcopal Church, we say that this is a positive way to say that all baptized Christians are welcomed at the table, right? So that's a nice way of saying if you aren't baptized, you're not welcome at the table. But when somebody comes up to the altar and presents their hands like this, I don't care if they're baptized or not. I'm not going to ask them if they're baptized or not. We are honoring the Spirit that moves them. Does that make sense? Okay. So I answer that question that way to let you know that we will honor some spontaneity. You know, if I were preaching next door, and I've preached in some environments where I get that kind of feedback, it actually builds you up as a preacher, and you don't know where the sermon's going to go because of that give and take, because of that response from the congregation. Great questions.
Well, that's coming from a teacher. A teacher.
Right.
Teacher is sending, and there's not a loop often of what happens out there. Did they receive it? What did they think? The feedback isn't there.
So I was contemplating at 5 minutes till here when there was just Jim showing, just Jim was here. How do I give this lecture with just Jim, knowing that there's some people out there too, right? And that's what you're talking about, that feedback, the energy from the room, which is real. We might even call it the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah.
Or a statement?
No, it's a question. I guess, are you asking how far we flex to welcome people who are not traditionally Episcopalian? And how much of our own liturgy do we forego in the idea of people who are uninitiated in this and unfamiliar with it might feel more comfortable with it? Is that sort of what's in there too, that question?
That was not my question, no.
No, I'm asking.
But that, yet another good question.
Excuse me.
This is a belief from me,
Mm.
that the Episcopal Church has gotten herself in a little bit of trouble over the last few decades because our numbers have been dwindling. And so we made a decision. We love you and we want you, and I don't want to impose on your time, so I'm not going to do any catechism or anything. And so they have absolutely no knowledge about what we do and why we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we disagree on something, we go back to our roots. If you came from a congregational church, well, you have a parish meeting and you vote them off the island, right? You know. But that's not the way the Episcopalians will do, disagree. We come together, we talk about it, we contemplate the via media, and we all go home feeling like none of us won. But we do have the things we believe in, how we worship. We believe we're a people of the book. Now, you can make a decision to put these words in a bulletin. And a lot of people would say that is a user-friendly way of worshiping. And we will do that on Easter because we don't have enough books to go around. But we'll put the hymns and the prayer book and any other prayers all in the same leaflet, so that one, like this Christmas, we had people sitting on the front row who had no idea what to do or which book to be in. And so a time when we know we're going to have visitors, when we know there's a big crowd, we should be helpful, you know. Most of the time it's us, or we're sitting next to somebody who will be helpful, and we can manage even 3 books. We can manage this one, the blue one, and the red one. But we will honor the words in the prayer book, and we'll follow the liturgies properly, write 1 or write 2. Or, and then in write 2 there's A and B. I think are the primary ones. C and D I think are, I probably won't use those very much, but Eucharistic prayer A and B. Any other questions before I move on to my next?
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
that I think we're very good with the welcoming the uninitiated until they sit in your pew.
Tell me about that.
Well, everybody's got their spot. You know, you come in and some stranger's in your spot and you're like,
Does anybody here switch around their seat?
no.
No. Yeah. Y'all
Yeah.
did. Okay. Yeah, and some people do. I gotta be somewhere over here on the gospel
That's
side. to
Suzanne's
make me-
pew over there.
Yeah, it's right there. And sometimes the days are in their spots, so what do they do?
Throw down.
Whose
in the
pew is it?
But that is a real problem, isn't it?
People get right possessive. of
There's a story about the church down the road here.
that.
No, that one. Somebody came up and they were in their pew that had their number. Said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is my pew." Well, they came here because of that reason. You know, because that was their welcome.
That's cold.
Well, we would never.
We would
say
never
you're
do
in my
that,
pew.
yeah.
We would get out of sorts.
But that is a natural piece of hospitality that I think we do well. I mean, we do like to sit where we like, but we'll scooch over and make room for
A
people.
little bit.
And we won't come and hover over my seat. We won't do that either. We'll find one really close to.
Speak for yourself.
All right.
You gotta train the ushers now to hover over you with the plates. When I'm putting something in, you gotta put something.
Well, the Baptists will come back around. They don't let you get that.
All right.
A number of times.
Yeah.
I did all that. So symbolic actions. This is another way we worship or don't worship. How many? Do y'all know what I'm talking about when I say we're a high church or a low church or just a broad church? Y'all are all familiar with that. So a lot of those in the Episcopal Church, you have a huge breadth of freedom. You know, you could be low church, middle church, high church, broad church. I would say that we are the lower side of broad church, but we're not all that low. We're not high for sure.
Would you explain broad? I know the low and high.
It means we do a lot of things at a big net. Yes.
That was my question. I've never heard broad church before.
Broad, I think most churches are more broad than taking a stance. I mean, you'll know an Anglo-Catholic church when you walk into it, a high church, because the incense will be going and
So is it still high church if it's everything but incense?
it could be, but I would probably say it's broad church.
Broad church. So broad church is a term that refers to taking bits and pieces from high and low, and so you've got a hodgepodge kind of some of each.
And I would also define broad church as a bit more formal than the low church. A lot of it's just a comparison, you know.
Because you're adding two from the high church service.
Right, so a high church may have a lot more chanting and singing. It will probably have incense, it will have bells from time to time, which
Smells and bells.
smells and bells, and which I do like, but I don't feel like that's us. It is a custom I'm used to. What are some other of these customs that we could, I don't see, but I'm always busy. I don't notice a lot of genuflexing or crossing. We do bow. I have seen us bow when the cross goes by. So what are those kind of manual things that you do that assist us in our worship? And that anything that you do, crossing yourself or whatever, is not you have to do it or you're not an Episcopalian, but they are to aid you in worship.
I think it has a lot to do with what you did growing up. I'm born an Episcopalian, but I've never in my life genuflected. We didn't do that,
Right.
so I don't do it now.
What about some others?
You know where I come from.
Good old Roman Catholic. Yeah.
We did all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I grew up Episcopalian, but my father was Eastern Orthodox.
Okay.
So,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh,
You have that kind of coming in, right? I've always, I grew up always bowing, and I didn't have a habit of even crossing myself, right? And so I go to seminary and everybody's doing. I thought, y'all got to tell me why I'm doing this for it to make any sense. I'm not going to do it just because everybody else is
I
doing
never
it. So-
understood when it was done. It seems
well,
like random.
there's so much flexibility in that it's.
So it is random.
I wouldn't say random, because every person's doing it for a reason at a certain time.
But
I
they're
have
different.
two things.
Yes.
One is, as far as what we do, physically what we do, I take a great deal, I really appreciate being able to kneel when I pray. There is something physical that happens. I don't know what it is. I haven't done the research, but I bet you there's gotta be some out there somewhere, but there is something that happens that is different when I pray on my knees than when I pray standing. That's one thing. And I really miss that. And the other thing is, and this is from an altar guild perspective, when you come down the aisle and you approach the altar, there's a little bow that you do as you approach the altar, and then when you finish and you leave, you turn and face and bow again. And then
Do we do that?
I do that.
I know our acolytes do that. Does the
But
con? I
I
haven't
don't
noticed.
know why I do that, except that's what
But you've always done.
that's
I
just
do that
what
when I read the
And,
epistle.
yeah, the rest, say the readers.
Yeah, the idea is to reverence the cross when you pass by the cross,
Or when it comes by you.
and when it comes by, but the cross here.
Yeah.
And when you say the Nicene Creed, in theory, everyone faces the cross for the Nicene Creed. That again, that verging on, that's what we always done. That's the way our liturgy goes. If we were to Google Episcopalian and some of the language in there, it would say that we stand to sing, we sit to learn, we kneel to pray. So those are our physical postures when we do these things. So that's hitting on what you said. So we're missing that kneeling to pray. And I'll say in this book, which was published in 1979, the kneeling, for the most part, becomes optional for you. Right to, thank you. I was going with the prayer. For right to. So stand or kneel. Again, they're thinking, Episcopalians get a bad rap. We're always up or down. We don't know what to do. Let's be more hospitable and say stand as you're able to.
Church aerobics, come on.
In previous parish, they had stacks of these little booklets that explained, and these were, I think, from the diocese, but they explained when you kneel, when you stand, what the sign of the cross is about, all those physical things that
Right.
you do during the mass, and people would be able to just snatch them up on the way to the seat. And
So are they like
Like a prayer.
the
For
church puzzles,
non-Episcopalians.
almost little stick figures?
No, they were a little better than that.
No, the ones I'm thinking of are like they got a solid color that says green and it's just an outline shape.
I was just wondering if those were available, and
Yeah,
you know,
yes.
if we're trying to be welcoming and retain the essence of our liturgy and practice,
Right.
but at
Except
the same
unfortunately,
time,
it wouldn't apply to us because we don't kneel.
We,
no, but the visitors might, and that's where I was going with
And we have,
On the floor.
our narthex is quite the assortment of stuff. So
Yeah.
we're everything with liturgy, I should have started with this, is dictated by space. where so much of liturgy is dictated by space. And of course, that was one of the sacred space is one of the five things. What about dipping your finger in the baptismal water, the holy water? Do we have a practice of using holy water here? We don't have a font, but to me, that would be something that's not so Anglo-Catholic. I think we could do that.
How would you do that?
Well, when we build a church,
No, I mean, if we had this. what
the
do you do
font
that
is
for?
supposed to be as you're coming into the church. The theology is it's the entranceway into a church is the baptismal font. All right, so you would come in. The first thing you hit is the font, and you got the altar. Imagine a sight line, if you would, if we were doing a funeral, right? So you have all the sacraments kind of lined up. You've got baptism. You've got right here it would be a burial of the dead. You have the Holy Eucharist. Then you have a cross as well. So all those major sight lines would be right there as you're walking into the church. Everything that's important to us. So again, the baptismal theology is a huge shift in this prayer book. Everything, the foundational is a baptismal covenant. That basically is the Apostles' Creed said, and we will form question and answer kind of thing.
So, if you had a baptismal font,
Mm-hmm.
so when you come into church, you put your finger in,
The water, just cross yourself. It's just a piece of piety.
I've never seen that anywhere. In
Really?
churches I've been in.
A piece of pie.
I've never not seen it.
You came here.
Somebody did.
So think about it though. The older churches, different theology. You would do your baptisms when they were, a different service off to the side, and it's central to our theology now and our liturgy now. So we put it front and center. So it's just a little shift. That's why a lot of transepts have the baptismal fonts, because
Trinity is that.
out of the way.
Trinity is that way.
Some of the older churches in Charleston, one of the major focal points is the pulpit, way up here, because that was a time when the spoken word, the sermon, was the most important thing that happened. They didn't have the Eucharist all that much.
Well, Presbyterian Church has one like that. We've been in there.
So, and that's why. So what are the priorities of your liturgy? We need to keep that in mind when we design our church. What's the main thing, right? The main thing's the main thing. Let's talk about a little bit about sacred time and space. Liturgy creates a sacred time and space, whether it's weekly, a weekly service, special occasion, a seasonal celebration. Liturgical practices marks moments as holy and set apart. And so every week, we do it weekly, we have the Holy Eucharist, right? And so our liturgy is divided into two parts: the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the table, with halftime in between. But there's a shift. There's a shift in my position. I'll come behind the altar. Everything else up until that point happens somewhere else. And we move everything in the liturgy to this point. The liturgy of the Word is we're hearing the prescribed readings for the day. And again, that seesaw that I spoke of. You hear it, we proclaim. Hear it, proclaim. And so our proclamation is in a hymn that we sing. And it's a response to text that we just heard, which is why we won't sing the same hymn every day. That's why we change them around, that if you're paying attention to the lyrics, they should match up with some of the readings that we're reading. It's not a random kind of thing, even if it seems random. That's why, oh gosh, was it Advent?
oh yeah.
Oh yeah. We had some hymns that we really had a hard time singing. They were appropriate, they were the right words, but they weren't something that we could sing. So, in my opinion, we need to make an adjustment. Because to me, as I'm designing liturgy, I want hymns to be singable, not just the right words. Yes?
Is there ever any use of chant where the word is? I mean, there are times where I'm here looking at words that are a whole lot better than the music that goes with them, and I'd much rather have them.
There is a lot of chant that can go on, but we have to have the musical leaders to lead it, as well as the musical IQ to sing it as well. And I don't have that leadership skill. I mean,
Well, I didn't know whether it was ever used in
sure,
Episcopal.
it is.
Okay.
It is. There's a service I like a lot. It's a Taizé service, which is a very meditative, prayerful service. It's designed around music and chant, very repetitive, and I've done it with the Eucharist in it as well. It's not designed that way. It's not designed to have the Eucharist in it. As an Episcopalian, I just wanted to put it in there. But it's certainly meant as more of a daily office kind of thing.
In the reverse of that, one of the things I said to you after I met you at a couple of services, I said something, you use your voice as a musical
Inflection.
reflection, and I found that I was complimenting, and in terms of how that is often used or less used or more personal, you know, it becomes your personality.
I think I picked that up reading books to my kids, trying to bring it to life to the children. My poor son, my youngest one, he says everything in monotone. I never can understand what he's saying because there's no inflection at all. And Connor, help me out here a little bit.
It is possible to, when Paul and I are in Maryland, we go to a church in downtown Annapolis, and they sing the song.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's like a chant. It is a chant. They chant and people.
Elizabeth told me that we have done that here.
Chant?
Singing the song. Now,
Oh, the song.
yeah, it takes,
Or
I think
chanting.
with some of the songs, it takes a good strong choir that's practicing on that at least once a week to be able to pull it off and lead the congregation in that. My last church, we chant the song every Sunday. Very few exceptions. But the choir did all the work. We just kind of followed along. I was talking about sacred space, setting things apart. Our idea is through our liturgy is to come to you'll heard the term a thin spot, a place where heaven and earth come really close to meeting. And with our liturgy, that's what we're trying to do. I think of Jacob's ladder, you know, when the angels were ascending and descending. I've always had a fond place for Canuga because that place to me feels like one of those thin spaces where holy things just seem to keep happening. Our worship here needs to be that through our attentiveness to what we're doing, why we're doing, and how we are offering ourselves up as our Eucharistic prayer says, a living sacrifice. You know, we respond to the word with our lives. You know, that's kind of the very last part. Our deacon for the last couple of weeks, he says, Mass is it? He doesn't say Mass. How's he say it? The Eucharist is ended, the service begins, something like that. And very good theology. You know, we should take all the back and forth that we do in here, the filling up that we get done at the liturgy of the table, and we are ready to go out into the world and to proclaim the good news through word and example.
Love and serve the Lord.
Say again?
To love and serve the Lord.
To love and serve the Lord. Another thing that our worship space provides is, and you won't, this doesn't come natural. We don't think that when we look around this room and see everybody who's older and white, right? But diversity. And when I think of that, is there's nothing that brings a bunch of random people together better than worship. I guarantee you, we're different political bents, and there's no place else in the United States where people who think politically different come together and actually don't come to blows, it seems like, anymore. But we'll come here, we'll come together, we'll worship together, we'll praise the Lord together, we'll do our best to do everything for a different reason than the rest of culture. Culture says do this, and we come together and we're saying we're going to do something different because we believe in a different way. Now, part of going out and serving the Lord is putting that into practice somewhere else besides this building. That's hard work. But that's one of the beauties of being in this space, or any liturgical space, is the randomness of people who come in and just kind of walk through the door. And then there's the transformation that happens during the liturgy. How many of y'all have ever been to a worship experience and you've just been so touched, something's happened in you that it sticks with you a little bit? That's what liturgy should do. Now, if we did that each and every Sunday, it's tough to keep that up, right? I think that's how some of the showmanship gets going on, and you know, oh, that works, and all of a sudden you're worshiping an idol over here, the showman, instead of sticking with the book and sticking with the prayers. And you know, there's some great cult of personalities that can get a big following, but who's it about? We got to remember, when we worship, our liturgy, our work is about God. It's not about any of us, which is how we can make sacrifices for the people who are sitting next to us who don't necessarily think like we do. We recognize it's not about me, it's not about you. It's about what we're doing together. I do want to talk about music a little bit, because I've never been to a church who thought that, oh, if we just change our music, that would be the thing that got more people in the building, right? Let's just do it this way, or whatever this way is. You know, it's clearly what they mean is, let's do it differently than what we're doing, so that we'll get that person over there, or this person over there, or that person over there. And no doubt it was somewhere, you know, thinking back to 1980, when it was a lot easier to do church. That people just were in the buildings. But we do have these hymns that they do go with Scripture. And so, like this Sunday, the gospel is for God so loved the world, the football sign holding up. And so we should hear something about God so loving the world, or the first part of that is about being Jesus saying that he's going to have to be raised up. So we might have some cross. I think "Lift High the Cross" is one of the hymns that we will do. So you'll see that they'll match. And it doesn't make sense. And so that's even just with the words. Seasonally, we have a lot of, in Advent, you don't sing a Lent song or an Easter song, that actually they're called hymns, not songs. but you have to again, think of the seesaw. They're supporting each other. And so there may be a great hymn that we love and we know how to sing, that we want to sing, and has absolutely nothing to do with our words. And so that's a major question. Well, why can't we sing whatever your favorite hymn is? And another reason we get ourselves in trouble with our hymns is we all grew up. I grew up an Episcopalian. I'm probably one of the few. Wow, we got 3, 4 of them.
Presbyterian.
Presbyterian, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist,
Lutheran.
Lutheran. So we got a lot of different ways of doing things coming into this room. And so each denomination has their hymnal, each denomination has what they like to hear. And music, I don't care which denomination you're in, somehow or another, it touches, at least for me, it touches the heart a lot quicker than the words will. And so there's something that's gonna make us remember that, and we're sitting in these pews of, oh man, you know what hymn would be perfect? Well, it's not in our hymnal, so why aren't we singing it? How come we can't sing it? And so already we're trying to make this into something that it can't be, because at least in the Episcopal Church we have to use the authorized hymnals. Now we have we've got, this is lift every voice and sing too, which implies there's a lift every voice and sing, but I don't know where that is. I don't know that I've ever seen it. There are a couple of other supplements, 3 or 4, not a lot, that we can use. And those are the ones that are authorized. And as Episcopalians, we also honor the rules.
Can I say
Yeah.
thing about music, because I think it's really one of the most important parts of the service, and I understand completely the need to stick to the theme or whatever the gospel is and that sort of thing, but I would think you could find a song somewhere that fits the words you wanna use, that's a little more singable, particularly in the church this small.
Okay.
People really struggle sometimes with some of those hymns.
And I do agree with you, but I'm gonna push back too.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna tell you that's somewhat subjective.
Oh, sure, but you can hear it sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
Oh, yeah. You
there's
can
one
hear it.
person singing.
I mean, I feel like I know it before we sing it on a
Oh,
Sunday,
it's
but,
struggle.
yeah,
Painful.
we've got some work to do there. We do have some work to do there, and yet part of what we have to do is work with what we got, right?
But there are plenty of good songs in there.
There are plenty of good songs. We have our musician who has her wheelhouse, right? That she can play, and you know what? I think she's just as good or better than anybody on the island. And we're thankful to have the musician. We're thankful to have this musician. We sure the heck don't want to be like 3 other churches on this island who are looking for musicians. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and so we just got to remember who we are, and we can indeed work on hymns that are more singable. I'm not promise you this Sunday's it.
We're gonna live High Cross for good.
We are doing the Tyler Cross, I think.
I'd like a special request.
There we go. Well, and I think that's one way to do this is from time to time, I said, can we sing this hymn and see when we can work those that are our favorites in the appropriate time and sing the appropriate way. I want to tell a story about the subjectiveness of music. When I was raising my children, I was at St. John's in Columbia. And my wife and I were the youth minister there. And I think just about every Sunday, they played a version of the first song of Isaiah by Jack Noble. Or Jack Noble White, whoever it was. And it goes a certain way, it's a peppy kind of song, and they did it absolutely every Sunday. My last set of children were twins, and one died. And we had a funeral for that child, and we loved that song so much that we had it played at the funeral. The song, the hymn, was never the same for us, because all of a sudden, an emotional event is tied to that particular song. Now, all of you know, and have been sitting in pews when something like that has happened in your life, where there is a hymn that matches up to an emotional part of your life, and forever that is changed that hymn or music for you, and you bring that with you to this church, and it's not, nobody else knows it usually, and the hymn comes and you just cry, and you say, well, that's a beautiful hymn, why are you crying? And music changes the soul that way. there are all sorts of hymns. It could be one you get married to. It could be one you just had that moment of transformation in your life, right? So there are all these different reasons why we like a hymn or don't like a hymn. And any given Sunday we'll have 40 to 50 people here, and we'll have 40 or 50 or 80 opinions about music. Music is the trickiest part of all our liturgy, I think. And for those reasons, very emotional, it is subjective, and we are confined a little bit, at least on what we should choose at different times. So that, I think, I wanted to start with that, to talk about what could be barriers to our worship here. I mean, and so this is, input from you guys. And then I want you to ask yourself, is it your barrier or is it a communal barrier? So my example, the first song, Isaiah, that's my barrier. That's not your barrier, right? But it could be I still like it now. I've kind of gotten back to the other side where I like it, so I'm going to try and get Elizabeth to play it one day. But for the longest time, that was just me. So is that right for me to change the liturgy for all of you? Because I have a hard time doing it? By the same token, though, if you knew that, you would certainly sacrifice for me, wouldn't you? Because that's what we do. So what are some of the barriers, like clapping? And while it may be something that drives you crazy, you caught yourself, God, I'm clapping again. Because everybody else is. I don't want to be that one guy who's not clapping. So what some barriers to worship? Doesn't have to be here, but in general. Yes?
I get more out of the experience when I come into a place and it's an environment for introspection.
You're having a hard time here.
I'm going with the flow. That's what's going on. But so there's a point where when you were early in your career here, where you introduced this silence, which helped overcome some of that, but it put the atmosphere more amenable to introspection than it was before you got here.
Right, and again,
It's like
space.
walking into the state fair.
It's not that bad.
Almost.
But I know what you mean.
It's raucous.
Yeah, we're chatting. We like to chat with each other, and I don't know. Would we want to take that away? Well, if we know that you can't pray, we probably would sacrifice. Maybe 5 till. We say, all right, stop talking. Whatever we need to do. We could do the prayer earlier.
Or say you're chatting for front porch fellowship.
Front porch fellowship.
Plenty of time.
There is. We are in no hurry most of the time.
I like the idea of the baptismal font back there. I was thinking, kind of on the same lines that you are, is if we had that and we crossed ourselves, that maybe that would signify to us
The
that,
hush.
yeah,
Sacred space.
yeah.
And a lot of that is, if it really is a big deal to us corporately, we can talk about it. This time is actually to talk about that sort of thing. These conversations have happened in private, and this is a way for us as a congregation to talk about these things so that it's a shame that if our liturgy, our sacred time and our sacred space ended up being an obstacle to somebody's worship. So the idea is to come together and be open. What's a non-negotiable? What's negotiable? Because we have a lot of latitude in a liturgical service.
But I also think that friendliness that we have in here
Yes,
is very inviting.
very.
I think that new people coming in, I think they see that, they feel that, hopefully we're speaking to them
Mhm.
as well as our friends and neighbors.
But you can also do that after.
Right,
If
well-
people hang around, you
Yeah.
know, a lot of times they just beat it
Yeah,
up.
I mean, it's sort of like the bulletin, why is everything in the bulletin, we don't need the bulletin. Well, don't use the bulletin, use your book. I mean, really, the bulletin's about it's a lot of paper used for the stranger who comes in, who doesn't know. That time when I had all my fraternity friends here, they had no idea what we were doing. And they all, I'm happy to say, are churchgoers, just not Episcopal
But
churchgoers.
don't people know that when they come into an Episcopal church, that they're not gonna have a clue what's going on?
They seem
I mean, it's
to,
pretty well known.
when I quizzed them about it, he said, don't worry, we held on tight, we were ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise when
Yeah.
you come in and see how
It is for some,
the rituals we go through.
it is for some. Some people, like, I've never been, I don't think I've been into a Baptist church. I've been in Black Baptist, not White Baptist. And I wouldn't know what to do or how to do it. When I went to a Catholic church, I've been using the books all my life. I didn't know what to do with the missal. I said, this makes no sense to me. But Sharon, who'd been doing it all her life, it was no big deal. And she tried to show me, but
She was a Catholic.
yeah.
I
So,
wish we would use the prayer book more.
We use it all the
I
time.
think that, and even for visitors, to me, there's more instruction in there, you
Yeah.
know. Stand, kneel, I mean, it's telling you those things. But also, it's not just a printed program that we have. You know, this is what we do
That's our
every
Bible.
Sunday for a reason. We
Right.
didn't just pick and choose that.
Yeah, there's a reason.
that's true. And one of the things, say again?
She and I have never discussed this.
Well, those are the exact words. Those are not unique words. I've heard those many a time. And this does have everything in it. It used to be, you could tell where right 1 or right 2 was, because those were the only dirty pages.
Yeah.
We don't use most of them, right? So turn to dirty page 1. Yeah.
I have a question about these prayer books.
Yeah.
Harry's.
The notes are in the, if you're looking for the notes, they're in the ones in the.
I know
curriculum.
why, that's my question.
I think because a lot of the pages are falling out.
They're older, yeah, they are.
They're just very
So-
meaningful to some.
Right, for a church that's not using them that much, will it make a difference is a good question. Yeah. So what's something else that might get in the way?
Not enough hymn books.
Okay. We did add, 20 of these this past week.
I thought it was 30 we voted on.
Well, maybe
A
it was-
lot.
Maybe it was 30.
It was plenty.
I wasn't there, honestly.
Yeah. Might have been 20.
I snuck it by me.
You're a millennial.
Yeah, you were there.
Card too.
But we do need more hymns too.
Thanks.
One of the things that can get in our way is the way we've always done it. And I really, really think we should always be on guard against that. Because it's gonna get in the way sometimes of the Holy Spirit moving within us. That, yes, we've always done it this way, but what if we tried it this way, it being whatever? I mean, what's our Maundy Thursday service look like here? Do we do foot washing here? Because we're going to. Does anybody come up?
We stripped the altar.
Better. I mean, that's part of the liturgy proper. Some people leave that, one or the other or both out. To me, that is Maundy Thursday, the mandate from the scripture that we're reading out there.
I think if you do things the same way, too long it gets to be rote and you're not thinking about what you're saying or doing. I sometimes wish we would have, morning prayer every now and then. I mean, those words are very beautiful to me. You know, when I grew up,
And familiar.
we had, morning prayer 3 weeks out of
We
the
did
month
too.
and one for communion.
And so, and that was one of the changes, canonical changes with the new prayer book, is your primary service must be Holy Eucharist.
Must be?
Must be
Wow.
your primary. Now, you can get around that if you had different services. And you can do like another one that was morning prayer, but your primary service is Holy Eucharist, because we're saying that that's the most important thing in our liturgy.
We were in a parish that used 1 week Rite 1, another week Rite 2, another week the 1928 Eucharist, and then morning prayer. On some rotation.
We would have to get bishop approval. Bishop can override anything. Never met a bishop who would though.
Well, we always started with morning prayer, but then went to the Eucharist.
Yeah, so that's called the anti-communion. You do it that way, and that was there was a lot of tension. There were churches that left the Episcopal Church because of that, and that was a way to appease people till over time they switch it to the way it is now. It's not designed to go together. It's clumsy.
Well, let's go back to 20 approval.
I heard,
Whatever it is.
I heard a thing, I don't know if I misheard it, that morning prayer is something that was used here when there was no priest.
That would be because you have to have a priest to celebrate Holy Eucharist.
And we were in that position a good bit.
Now, in theory, now I'm sure they made some exceptions here, but I don't know. In theory, a priest is here one Sunday, he could, or she, could consecrate a whole bunch of wafers that you would give out until the next time they were there. Did y'all ever do that? No? So it was either morning prayer or, you do what you gotta do. And
Yeah, it seemed like one time when we had somebody who was, what was he?
Fred was
Deacon.
Deacon, and he had to get somebody to.
Right.
Yeah. And he talked about trying to get more so that you didn't have to go to that person.
And my guess is the bishop said no.
We didn't do it. Now why, I don't know, but yeah, but,
Why would the bishop say no?
but he went.
Holy Eucharist is consumed when it's done. Now, you have some, and I'd love for us to have something in reserve to take to the sick. To those
Oh,
who,
we don't do that at all now?
not in reserve, because we don't have any place to reserve something. So if I were to go do a home communion with you, I'd have to do the service. Or if I knew before the week, I would hold some out.
Suzanne?
Yeah, we used
had a
to
box.
do that,
Yeah,
where
boxes
you
down there.
leave the service.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea of the theology is they are still part of this service. You would actually leave before the dismissal.
Yeah, that's what she was saying.
You would
Yeah.
walk out, go out the door, and go to that person's house.
Suzanne did that, she would come up and get the box from
Yep.
the church and leave.
And then everything changed during COVID.
Yeah.
So you had to rethink all the theology. We got all these people who aren't here. How do they receive communion if that's the central point of your liturgy?
You know how we did it? I'm embarrassed to say.
Go on there.
Yeah, tell it, Harry.
Wafers were put in Ziploc bags and you would stop by the
And pick it
church
up.
and pick up your Ziploc bag so that you would then have it.
And hope to God somebody blessed it.
Yeah, well, I think that was a given,
Well, we hope so. We
but
didn't
then
see it
you
happen.
would have it for when you watched the service on
If you
Sunday
Ziploc bag it
and
up.
the time for communion.
Right.
We may do.
There were a lot of, again, bishops weighed in heavily throughout the nations on what they would allow and what they wouldn't allow. Those with a higher theology of
They wouldn't have liked.
they wouldn't have liked that. The more Anglo-Catholics aren't gonna like that.
We had the best bishop for our time, I'll tell you that.
Let's just say our local union here, priests and all, they were a little bit easier to go.
We
They
got
also
it,
feel like
we got it
preach.
done.
All right, so are there any other barriers? Well, then what do you love? Let's talk about the positive. I'm gonna end with the
Good,
positive.
good music.
Let us go forth into,
I like the music, that's the
What is
biggest
good?
thing to me.
That's subjective thing.
I know. But you asked.
I did ask. Oh, well, to me, music is most important as well.
I like the sermon and the music.
The sermon, I like to hear that.
I know,
Although I
something like
haven't gotten an applause yet.
She's
You
so
had us deep in thought.
You were deep in thought.
You know, as incongruous as the space is with what we do, I like this old building. I like the light that comes through. And there's some beautiful symbolism right behind you. And when my mind starts to wander, one of the things I see is that palm tree with its fronds pointing to the cross. And then above you is the light, and it's shining down on the cross. And so when I glaze over, I'm really looking at that.
That's your story.
It's not their sermon.
So, well, and that's a wonderful thing, and we need to think of that with clear windows if and when we ever build. The things that we like about this space, you know, my seminary chapel, and I've worshiped a few times at Pawleys Island, and they had those windows where you can overlook the oak trees
Which
at Pawleys,
Faith
Holy Cross
Memorial.
Faith Memorial.
Nice, I love that
That's,
building.
I love that back of that,
Right.
behind the altar.
Yeah.
But my normal view is all of you, which is not terrible. Yes.
Good to hear.
Well, when you bring up something that,
Are you worried?
Good.
I agree with what has been said. However, I'm pretty doubtful that in the search committee looking for property and is more, that the aesthetics isn't really part of the choice,
Meaning what?
the future choice. So what could possibly be seen from inside that is outside?
Trees and that kind of stuff.
I will say that, I mean, there's an empty lot over there with absolutely no trees, and it's for sale, and the committee said no for that, I think for that reason.
Aesthetics.
Yeah, I mean, you can plant a tree.
That's exactly right.
Gotta live a while to see it though.
You-
No, I
And-
know, I've planted 14 footers.
There's a beautiful piece of property down towards the beach a little bit more. It is for sale, and we're looking to get a price. It has some of the oak trees that we're talking about and some palmetto trees. Many of us have walked the property, it's gorgeous, and we can envision kind of what we're talking about there. Now, can we envision how much it's gonna cost?
Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
I like also knowing that Hempstead's back there.
And and so 10, 15 years down the road when we finally are somewhere. How do we carry that? We can't take the tombstone, but how do we carry that spirit with us?
Live to be a leader like she was.
Right, and stand up in the face of persecution, and that's not right, you know? Have your voice.
I have a question I haven't thought of for a long time, until just this minute. And that is, when we do have a new space and a new location, what do we want to do do we want to have a cemetery? Do we want to have a columbarium? Do we want to have a place for eternal rest?
Aren't those great questions?
Yeah.
Gosh, they're so expensive. I would love for our answer to be yes. We'd have to have enough property. South Carolina, I'm sure, would have a say-so in that. 5 acres, yeah. So you're 5 acres for the cemetery alone,
5 acres extra.
No, total.
total. So there would be some hurdle. It would be so cool.
Well, columbariums don't take up that much.
Yeah.
No, so that would be a nice episcopal way to take care of that.
Yeah, that's what they've got to say.
So does any, so you said that, I didn't think about this, but what about the Catholic Church here? They don't have a cemetery, right? Where do they bury?
No idea.
I bet it's becoming more commonplace for even Catholic churches to have the columbariums. And so maybe there's one there.
Maybe there is, I never thought about it. Curious.
I'm satisfied with the ocean.
I like the ocean.
I'm going in the creek.
I'd really want us to have some outdoor space for an outdoor chapel of some sort.
Those seams gotta be.
I know, and that's the thing. Of course, my
You
my
have been
outdoor
here.
chapel, mob was probably up in the mountains, which we're not there.
I was thinking of a cemetery.
Oh,
Yeah, me too.
oh, just kind of dumping you in the water?
Speaking
No,
of zip
I was,
lining.
I've experienced a service that I will never forget. And it happened to, be the person was in the military and the service was in Hilton Head. And it was at SC burial. And it was so moving. They held it right where there were people in restaurants and so on and so forth, and they had color guard and they had everything to it. But the pastor and the person in charge kind of said to everybody, "Don't let us upset you, but whatever, we're going to finish this and go off to sea." And then went out to the limit and so on and so forth, and ashes were put in, and there was I guess, a wreath that carried the ashes, and the instruction was positioning the boat so it was right as far as the tide. And then the story of now so-and-so is going to go out and he's going to hit the channel and he's going to go around the earth and so on and so forth. And afterwards I was able to have this chat with him, and he was Coast Guard, and tell me about all of this. And he says, first of all, anybody can get this service. You don't have to be military. Didn't know that. And then he went on to say, what other experience can incorporate all your senses, the seagulls, the water, and everything, and it was all there, I guess I have never forgotten it, obviously.
Right.
And thinking about how we are all raised to a standard cemetery, and how that has altered those who will always have that, and those who have moved to other kind of experiences, as I've just talked about.
I've always told my family, I don't care what they do with me, because I'll be done with this. You can burn it up, throw it in the ocean, plant it, whatever you need to do. It matters not to me, because I will be somewhere with my Lord. What you do with this shell, I've been starting to rethink that since I've been here, and looking at all these old cemeteries and the history in those. It fascinates me. I said, all right, so maybe I do want something different. So.
I'm sorry that drifted this whole thing.
Well, that's okay. But I think it shows that we can change our mind on things too. I used to think I could only serve in a church that had stained glass windows, because to me that was church. Well, I'm glad I had an open enough mind to see something different. I think I could do a storefront if y'all came with me. Right? So it becomes more about the people than the aesthetics. But the aesthetics do play a role in how you worship. It'd be harder, a lot harder if we were in a storefront. But we'd do it if we had to. If for some reason this was unavailable.
When we were in a storefront, my memories of that were just pure elation. Oh my gosh, it couldn't have been better.
That was in the free at last phase.
Yeah. It was.
We could have been in a ditch, it
We
wouldn't
could
matter.
have.
Well, and so that puts it in perspective, doesn't it? And that's what worship is supposed to be about. It's a shame that you have to have a negative side by side to know what worship is supposed to be about. But you can always tap into that energy, that feeling to know when you worship from now on. You know what it's not, you know what it is.
I don't think that we, as the original people, have ever had such joy as we do.
Oh my gosh, we just.
I mean, it's
walked
great now,
around.
but it was just like, we can't believe we're doing this.
That's what
Running
today's
from ear
scripture
to
was
ear.
about. As in the Ezra, the temple's gone.
Yeah.
And this is their first time going back and
What do you
building
think?
and all right, before we do anything, we're gonna set up an altar, we're just gonna worship.
That's what we did.
That's
It's
why,
barbecue.
that's why I chose that one, because it's kind of us. or y'all, us now. Any other parting comments? All right, let's go forth into the world rejoicing in the power of the Spirit.
Thanks be to
Praise
God.
God.
Be there for me.
When did you and she